This is a continuous improvement movement reserved for the few with the grit to prove it. Everybody.
Good morning. This is Maria, and I am here with my co-host Calvin Williams. This is the Ticket to Freedom podcast. On this podcast, we discuss continuous improvement as it pertains to current events. And today, we're going to discuss an article just released by Information Weekly. This article talks about the 6 strategies for overcoming the weight of process debt. Companies are failing to reduce process debt prior to acquiring new technology. What do you think about that, Calvin?
I think this comes from a mindset of home run hit thinking, right? Looking for a kind of a silver bullet to the business issues that they may face, right? When the reality is that for a company to truly have a competitive advantage in the market, it's not necessarily going to come from acquiring a new technology, right? It's going to come from being able to develop people to be more adaptive and to find opportunities for improvement and to not be complicit with those problems and opportunities that they see, but to take action and to manage change and all the things that comes along with actually improving business performance. So yeah, I think, for companies to look for a tech solution to a process problem is not uncommon. A lot of time what they're really doing is just automating bad processes. And this is where the issues come from. So yeah, you take a bad process and you automate it, you're going to end up with a bad process except at a greater scale. So there's a little bit of a dangerous component to it as well. So yeah, really what it comes down is developing people.
Mm-hmm. And PricewaterhouseCoopers has this survey called Pulse, and they noticed that a majority of business executives purchase technology to improve, hoping it will fix those processes. And more than half of them have already invested in AI for some area of their organization. Why is that happening?
Yeah, I think it comes back to like I was saying, right? It's people are looking for a way around the real issue. And the real issue is, can you develop people, and can you develop people to develop the processes that they use to serve the customer, right? I think it's easy to lose sight that what businesses are really doing is people serving people at the end of the day, right? And we talk about process debt, right? There's also a kind of a people development debt that's out there, right? And that's, the inability to keep up with the changing world that's out there, right? And, in terms of process debt, every time you run that process, you incur a little bit of a debt or a tax, because if the process is less than optimal, you incur a little bit of a debt every time you run that process. And if you're a big business, you might be running that process, 1,000 times a week, more or less, right? So, it's really important to weave out that process debt. And at the root of it, you got to ask the question, how did that process debt come to exist, right? At some point in the past, you have to assume that, maybe there was no debt or very low debt, right? And over time, that debt has increased, right? The reason that debt has increased is because of a people development debt, right? And a cultural debt as well, right? Where, people weren't empowered to solve the problems that they see around them every day, right? The people closest to the problems are also the ones closest to the best solutions. So if they're empowered to say, oh, I see that, let me take some steps to address it, and the business becomes overburdened by bureaucracy and red tape and all the things, and perhaps unfair treatment of employees and unjust consequences to certain behaviors and actions by employees and things like that. All that just kind of racks up a few debts. Part of it being it shows up as process debt, but it's really a kind of a people development, people management debt. So it kind of starts with leadership to kind of set a tone of, hey, we will innovate, we will stay ahead of the game. Some of these other things that we've kind of prioritized may become less of a priority so that we can we can prioritize competitive advantage. And that really comes down to adaptability, right? Adaptability to reality as it rolls in. And once you've got excellent processes, then automation can do you a lot of good, and technology can do you a lot of good.
Mhm. So, Calvin, this article highlighted 6 main steps to reduce the process debt. So I'm going to go ahead, tell you the 6 steps so you kind of have them in the back of your mind and people can use them as they see fit. And then at the end, we can talk a little bit about the key steps that we saw. So first is conduct a comprehensive audit and map the processes. Then we move on to establishing clear objectives. Third, we pilot, test, and optimize. Fourth, ensure scalability with automation. Fifth, monitor, measure, and refine. Sixth, pursue a culture of excellence. Which do you think are the key elements here for a successful, to reduce that process debt?
Yeah, I think it's a solid list. I probably would list the second one first, which is develop a strategy, develop goals, right? If you don't know where you're going, you probably won't get there. Isn't that
Right.
I think Yogi
That's how
Berra
it goes.
statement?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that third one is powerful though, right? It's the one where you pilot, you
Test and
test
optimize.
and optimize, right? I think that's where you're going to spend probably 80% of your time. And that's where you're really going to gain. And that is the part that requires people development, the culture, the, you know, innovative mindset, the 1% better everyday mindset. And then once you've got to a point, the word optimize is suboptimal. Because you're never at 100%. You can never
Right.
optimize anything to the, there's no such thing as perfect, right? There's always room for improvement. So, I guess you got to draw the line, and this is where goal setting and everything comes into places. When you're performing at a clip where you're meeting your goals, you're probably good enough, right? You're probably good enough and even good enough to automate and bring automation. So we've got a process. It's doing what we want. Now let's bring in automation to take this process to scale, essentially. So I think that third step is where you're going to spend most of your time. The last couple, I think the last one is something like create a
Pursue
culture
a
of
culture,
excellence.
yeah, of
Yeah.
excellence.
Yeah. That one is easy to say, hard to do. Culture changes is always culture is one of those things that's hard to measure. It's hard to see what a culture is. You kind of experience a culture, you kind of give a sense for what it is, but in terms of visualizing and truly quantifying what your culture is, it's very difficult to do. So this one is just one of those things where the culture over time emulates the priorities and the mindset of the leader. So, a lot of companies have a culture of replacing leaders every 2 years, every couple of years. I say 2, but it could be 3, 3.5, 4. This short cycle through mindset amongst leaders creates a short-sightedness amongst leaders, and creating a culture of excellence is kind of a long-term endeavor. So I think one of the challenges companies face is, how do you get leaders who know that their tenure is potentially short sight or short-lived? How do you get them to focus on long-term culture growth and improvement? Maybe one of the solutions is leave leaders in place for long enough to
Yeah, there's
really
so much that
yeah,
goes into it. And I guess it depends on the company too. Because even though
absolutely.
you said it's so hard to measure culture, and it is because it's a little bit of a vague thing. I think companies should make an effort to measure it in the sense that they have to choose what kind of culture they want. Like they want a culture of quality, they want a culture of safety. So measure those key KPIs that are important
Right.
to them. If it's employee engagement, that can be measured a little bit too. Are they happy? Are they providing ideas? Are those ideas being implemented? So there
Yeah.
are little things that can be measured here and there to make sure you're going in the right path.
Or at least to make sure that the results are coming in where they should be, right?
Mhm.
But I think if you're measuring culture, you're also looking at, leading indicator, leading behavior patterns that create those kind of results too, right?
Right.
I'm a big fan of leader standard work, right? Where, people have a set of routines and they stay disciplined to those routines, right? I know I talk about discipline a lot, but this is another
Yeah.
case where discipline and culture kind of go hand in hand, right? Discipline creates culture ultimately. So if you got the right disciplines in place, the right behavior patterns, the right routines in place, you have a little more control, or a little more of a more manageable lever over culture, especially when you're a leader that has a disciplined set of routines. So, if you take 10% off here and add 10% over here, you can see a real measurable impact to the culture, right? If you're very disciplined as a leader. So likewise, a undisciplined leader creates a culture of chaos. So, it goes both ways, I suppose.
Yes, I agree. Okay, with that, this is your daily motivation to go look at those processes. This is the Ticket to Freedom podcast, and we hope to see you again tomorrow. Thank you.
Just in time, not a second slow. From the top flow to the shop flow, come on. Everybody, let's go.